Alright folks, buckle up. I'm about to take you on a journey into the heart of suburban pettiness. A tale of power trips, garden gnomes, and the sweet, sweet taste of malicious compliance. This is the story of how my homeowners association tried to destroy my life and instead signed a deal to pay me triple my mortgage. Forever. My name is Alex, and I live in the picturesque, soul-crushingly uniform suburb of Pleasant Oaks Estates. The name itself should have been a red flag. Every lawn is an identical shade of golf course green. Every mailbox is the same brushed nickel monolith. Every house is a variation of beige. It's like living in a movie set for a film about conformity. I'm a pretty easygoing guy. I mow my lawn on Saturdays. I bring my trash cans in before sundown on pickup day. I keep my opinions on their aesthetic choices to myself. I just wanted a quiet place to live. That was my first mistake. The incident, the spark that ignited this whole powder keg, was a gift from my 8-year-old niece. For my birthday, she gave me a garden gnome. Not just any gnome. This was Norman the Guardian. He was about a foot tall, had a slightly lopsided grin, held a tiny fishing rod, and was painted in colors so bright they probably violated a local ordinance. I loved him instantly. I placed Norman proudly next my petunia bed. A little splash of personality in a sea of beige. For 3 whole days it was perfect. Then, on the 4th day, the letter arrived. It wasn't in a normal envelope. It was in a stiff, cream-colored parchment, as if they were serving a royal decree rather than a neighborhood complaint. It read, "From the desk of the Pleasant Oaks Estates HOA Board. President, Barbara, the Barbarian Kunkel. Violation notice. Alexander, my address. Code 42B, subsection 12. Prohibited lawn ornamentation. Dear resident, it has come to our attention that your property is in flagrant violation of the community's aesthetic standards. You have installed a non-conforming, garishly colored garden gnome, hereinafter referred to as the eyesore, within the front yard curtilage. Per the Pleasant Oaks Estates covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CC and RS. All exterior ornamentation must be pre-approved by the Architectural Review Committee, ARC. The eyesore has not been approved. Furthermore, its whimsical nature is not in keeping with the serene and dignified atmosphere we strive to maintain. You are hereby ordered to remove the eyesore within 24 hours. Failure to comply will result in a fine of $50 per day until the violation is remedied. Sincerely, Barbara Kunkel, HOA President." I actually laughed out loud. The eyesore. Hereinafter referred to? Who talks like this? I figured it was a mistake. A simple conversation would clear it up. Oh, my sweet summer child. I decided to be the bigger person. I went to the next HOA meeting, Norman free, ready to calmly explain the situation. The meeting was held in a community room that smelled of stale coffee and resentment. At the head of the table sat Barbara Kunkel. If you pictured a HOA Karen, you've pictured Barbara. Severe blonde bob, oversized designer glasses she probably called spectacles, and a permanent expression of someone smelling a fart. I raised my hand during the open forum. "Hi, Barbara. Alex from 1428. I got your note about my garden gnome. It was a gift from my niece. I was just wondering what the specific issue is. It's just a small statue." Barbara peered over her spectacles, her lips pursed. "Mr. Alex?" she began, her voice like gravel being poured slowly onto a linoleum floor. "The issue is precedent. If we allow one whimsical figurine, then the Johnsons will want a pink flamingo. The Millers will want a gazing ball. Before you know it, we'll look like a carnival midway. Our property values will plummet. Chaos." A few of the other board members, a group of sycophants I called the Nod Squad, nodded vigorously. "Chaos," I repeated, trying not to smile. "From one gnome." "It starts with one gnome," she said gravely. "It always does. The rules are the rules. Remove it or the fines stand." I left feeling baffled. But I'm also stubborn. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I went home, printed out a high-resolution, full-color photo of Norman, laminated it, and staked it right where he used to stand. The next day, I got another letter. Violation notice. Unauthorized signage. Fine. $75. They'd officially jumped the shark. This is where the war began. I paid the fines under protest, but I also started a new hobby. Petty compliance. I read the CC and RS. All 187 pages of them. I became a scholar of HOA law. I learned that my mailbox, which was the approved model, was 1/8 of an inch too tall. I reported it myself and demanded they force me to replace it. They were thrilled, until they realized the only vendor who sold the approved model had gone out of business in 2012. I discovered a bylaw that stated lawns must be maintained in a healthy, green condition. So I overseeded my lawn with clover. It was green. It was healthy. It was also, technically, not grass. Barbara's I started twitching. The letters kept coming. They fined me for my trash can lid being ajar by more than 2 inches. They fined me for a non-regulation welcome mat. They even fined me because the shadow from my tree fell on my driveway in an asymmetrical and disruptive pattern. But I documented everything. Every letter. Every interaction. I recorded every conversation I had with Barbara or her lackeys. After checking my state's one-party consent laws, of course, I started a dedicated Instagram account at Pleasant Oaks Purgatory, and the support from neighbors was overwhelming. Turns out, I wasn't the only one living under Barbara's beige thumb. The final straw came via certified mail. Final notice. Intent to levy lien and initiate foreclosure proceedings. The letter claimed I had accumulated over $5,000 in fines and violations. It was nonsense. I had receipts showing I'd paid every stupid fine they'd levied. But the kicker was the last paragraph. Due to your repeated and willful disregard for the standards of this community, the board has voted to exercise its right of first refusal under Bylaw 7C. You have 72 hours to accept an offer from a buyer we have procured for 80% of your home's market value, or we will begin foreclosure. Consider this your final warning. They wanted me to sell my house, at a massive loss, in 3 days. My blood went from warm to absolute zero. The calm, reasonable part of me checked out. The petty, document-obsessed, justice-seeking part of me took the wheel. 72 hours. I called a lawyer friend, who told me their right of first refusal was almost certainly unenforceable the way they were using it, but fighting it would be long and expensive. Barbara was banking on me rolling over. I wasn't going to roll over. I was going to dig. I spent the next 48 hours in a deep dive that would make a conspiracy theorist proud. I cross-referenced every obscure bylaw. I looked up property records for every board member. And then, I struck gold. Or, more accurately, I struck illegal rental property. Bylaw 11A, subsection 3, clearly stated, no property within Pleasant Oaks Estates shall be used for short-term rental purposes, e.g., Airbnb, VRBO. Leases must be for a term of no less than 12 months. I knew Barbara lived in her house, but what about the other properties she owned? The property records showed she owned 2 other homes in the neighborhood. One was occupied by her elderly mother. The other was listed on Airbnb. I pulled up the listing. Charming cottage in dignified Pleasant Oaks. The photos showed her house, filled with tacky, unapproved wicker furniture and, I swear I'm not making this up, a whole collection of garden gnomes on the back patio. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. But I wasn't done. I drove past her primary residence. And there it was. A violation so blatant, so glorious, it made me gasp. Her fence was a good 6 inches taller than the maximum 4-foot height stipulated in Bylaw 9F. And her driveway, her beautiful, pristine driveway, had been recently repaved with a different shade of asphalt. It was a blatant violation of the Uniform Surface Covenant. The hunter had just become the hunted. The next night was the monthly HOA board meeting. The room was packed. Word had gotten out about my 72-hour notice. My Instagram followers had shown up for the main event. Barbara started the meeting with her usual smugness. Now, before we begin, it has come to my attention that one homeowner has chosen to flagrantly disregard our community's foundation, our rules. While unfortunate, we must be steadfast. I waited for her to finish her villain monologue. Then I stood up. "Barbara," I said, my voice calm and clear, "I have a few questions about the bylaws. For clarification purposes." She sighed dramatically. "We don't have time for your games, Alex." "Oh, this isn't a game. It's about the rules. You love those, right?" I pulled out my tablet. "Let's start with Bylaw 11A, subsection 3. The one about short-term rentals. Could you clarify what the penalty is for violating that?" Her face tightened. "That's not relevant to—" "I have here," I said, projecting my voice, "a listing for 1432 Magnolia Lane, which is owned by you, Barbara. Is currently available for weekend rentals on Airbnb. It also features several non-conforming garden gnomes." A murmur went through the crowd. Barbara's face flushed. "That's a lie," she sputtered. "I have screenshots," I said cheerfully. "But let's move on. Bylaw 9F. Fence height. The maximum is 4 feet. I took a tape measure to your fence at 1421 Oak Drive this afternoon. It's 4 feet, 6 inches tall. And while I was there, I couldn't help but notice your driveway. Bylaw 4D requires all driveways to be of a uniform material and color. Yours is clearly a different shade than your neighbor's. I have photos." I started projecting the images onto the wall from my tablet. Gasps. Laughter. The Nod Squad had stopped nodding. They were staring at their hands. Barbara was apoplectic. "How dare you? This is an invasion of privacy. This is you breaking the very rules you're trying to foreclose on me for," I said, my calm finally breaking into righteous anger. "You issued me a fine for a picture of a gnome while you're running an illegal hotel. You threatened to take my home while your property is in constant violation. This isn't about rules. This is about a power trip." The room erupted. Other neighbors stood up, shouting their own grievances. Unfair fines, rejected paint colors, the time Barbara fined someone for having a wrong-colored curtain visible through a window. It was a full-blown uprising. The meeting ended in chaos. Barbara was voted out as president on the spot by a unanimous decision from the rest of the board, who suddenly found their spines now that the mob was at the gates. Emergency election was held. They elected Mrs. Gable, a sweet old lady who Barbara had once fined for having a bird feeder, as the new president. Their first order of business? Throw out every fine Barbara had issued in the last year. But my lawyer friend had one more piece of advice. "They harassed you, Alex. They tried to force you out of your home with fraudulent claims. You have a massive countersuit for harassment, abuse of power, and emotional distress. You could own the HOA. I didn't want to own the HOA. I just wanted to be left alone. And I wanted to make sure this could never happen to anyone else. So we made a deal. My lawyer and I met with the new board and their attorney. We were calm. We were reasonable. We had them by the bylaws. We didn't sue them into oblivion. Instead, we proposed a new bylaw. The Norman Clause. Henceforth, no homeowner could be fined for reasonable, non-structural yard decorations under 2 feet tall. Gnomes were free. And for the harassment, the abuse, and the attempted theft of my equity, we demanded a perpetual settlement. The HOA would not fine me, ever again, for any violation. Not now, not in the future. My property was essentially HOA-proof. But the real kicker? To compensate me for the legal fees and stress, the HOA would pay me a monthly stipend. We calculated it as triple what the average renter in my area would pay for a room. It was a number so absurd I thought they'd laugh. They didn't laugh. Their lawyer advised them to sign. It was cheaper than a lawsuit they would definitely lose. So they signed. Now, every month, like clockwork, I get a check from the Pleasant Oaks Estates HOA. The amount is roughly triple my mortgage payment. I used the first few checks to build a beautiful, elaborate garden gnome sanctuary in my front yard. It features Norman as the centerpiece, surrounded by his new friends from all over the world. There's a gnome with a little sombrero, a gnome dressed as a Viking, you name it. The best part? The new HOA president, Mrs. Gable, brings her grandkids by to see it sometimes. She says it's whimsical. As for Barbara, she moved out about 6 months later. Couldn't take the shame, I guess. The last I heard, she moved into a high-rise condo. I hope for their sake it doesn't have an HOA. So that's my story. They gave me 72 hours to sell. And now they're paying me to stay. Forever. Remember folks, know your rights. Read the fine print. And never, ever underestimate the power of a well-placed gnome.